We are delighted to have Dr. Guilia Faggio with us. Guilia teaches at the London School of Economics, where she has been for the past 3 years. She has worked a great deal on various aspects of labor markets in Europe, including the role of gender in labor markets, the role of varying activity levels on things like economic output and growth. She has been part of a large project on the economics of transition, the transition from communism to something else in the economies of the Central and East European countries, and has been in that capacity a consultant for the European Bank for Reconstruction and Development, EBRD. Dr. Faggio has been a visiting scholar in a number of exotic locales, including Bergen, Norway, where she spent a couple of years, has publications in a number of impressive outlets, currently working a lot with Stephen Nicol, one of the governors of the Bank of England, on some really interesting research. She's been giving seminars this week for the econ department. Tomorrow, I think we have you going to the management school, and today we have her to talk about economic growth in Europe. How does the regulated EU economy interact with the flexible UK economy? Dr. Guilia Faggio.
Thank you very much. Thank you for inviting me here. Okay. So today my topic is about economic growth in Europe, and I want to compare the countries of the European Union with the UK. First, I want to give you like a global picture of Europe. I want to compare countries of the European Union and take as a term of comparison the United States, because I think that it would be easier for us to place the different countries in this context. Then I move behind the global picture, and I will try to explain the differences between the UK and other countries of continental Europe. Well, other continental European countries. For the global picture, one common indicator of economic growth is GDP per capita. As a GDP, I mean the gross domestic product. GDP measures the value of all goods and services produced in economy, and it does not distinguish between if it's a foreign producer or is a national producer. So when we want to consider countries like Ireland, Luxembourg, or Switzerland, then the foreign production is very important. Switzerland and Luxembourg are financial centers and have a lot of foreign capital. So you will see that the GDP per capita is not the best measure for this country, but it is for the other countries. So we take with caution the picture of these three countries. And then after, in the global picture, after looking at GDP per capita, I try to, we will see the sources of the GDP differences. Sometimes in the presentation I use the GDP, and sometimes I use income or standards of living. They are all interchangeable terms. Okay, this is just, I give you a series of pictures, and I hope that you can follow me in this. The first one, we look at GDP per capita levels. It's 2002. You can see the US is here. You know, it's at 0. And these are the percentage gap relative to the United States. You can see Luxembourg is a very positive gap, but you know, because of being a financial center. But look at countries like France, Germany, and the United Kingdom is the very last bar. The level is about 25% lower than the United States in 2002, and it's a substantial gap. But then we look at here at the GDP per capita growth rates. I take averages over the 1994-2003 period. Again, these are gaps relative to the United States. Ireland has is a very high positive gap because it's been the country has been able to attract a lot of foreign capital, and there's a lot of multinational in this period entering in the island. But look at United Kingdom. United Kingdom has a positive gap relative to the United States, while France, countries like France, Germany, Italy is a negative one. So the positive gap means that countries are catching up to the US, while the negative gap is they're not able to catch up. So this one is just a summary of what I have described up to now. I try to, okay, here. I'm sorry for this. This is the only equation I present. I tried to look at the sources of GDP differences. Just consider the first equation, this one. Okay, on the left side, we have just the definition of GDP per capita. GDP per capita can be decomposed, we can say, in three parts. The first part means how much the economy is able to produce in an hour, is what we call labor productivity. The second part is how many hours actually the working population, like one person, is putting annually. So how many hours a person is working. And the last part is how many people of working age are in the population. Working age, I mean 16, 64 years old people. But I want to redecompose again the second, what I call labor resource utilization, that is the total number of hours that a person is working, in other two parts. Because in the working age population, you have people that are unemployed, people that are inactive, and people that actually work. And I just want to measure the number of hours of people that are actually working. So we have here the average hours work, and then we have the number of people who are working over the population. So what is called employment rates. I do this because now I present a series of pictures of the different components. And then you will see that the UK is very good in, it's a very, well, we can say lower gap in the labor resource utilization but when we decompose again, you will see some differences. Okay, I try to make it more clear now. Okay, this one is the first. It's just how much is produced in an hour in an economy. Look at France as a positive labor productivity. France, Belgium, Italy, Ireland, and even Germany has a higher labor productivity than the United Kingdom. And I tell you, this is a great puzzle. In England, we're still, in the UK, a lot of people are still trying to explain this. That there is actually the United Kingdom has a lower labor productivity than countries in continental Europe. So here is the second part. The total number, the total number of hours worked over the working age population. Look at, is the gap always a percentage gap relative to the United States? The UK is the very last bar. The gap is the lowest. So we can say, well, this is a good result for the UK. But then we distinguish the second, like the last graph that I presented to you. And this part is the total number of hours work per employee. And the United Kingdom, yeah, we can say it's quite good, but it's not the best performer. Like the Greece and people in Greece and in Spain, and also in Portugal and Finland, they're performing better. So maybe we can say Greece and Spain didn't work. There are not so many people in working, but when they work, they work very hard. Then is the other part, is the number of people who are employed over the working age population, because the working age include unemployed people, inactive people, and employed people. And then here we see a difference between countries of continental Europe, like France, Germany, Italy, Spain. They have a negative gap relative to the United States. But countries of Northern Europe, like UK is the very last bar, Switzerland, Sweden, Norway, Netherlands, Denmark, they have a positive employment rate. So this is something to keep in mind. It's the first, it's an important result. So here just is briefly the summary of what we have seen. So we've looked at labor productivity, and the UK is among the countries with the lowest productivity in Europe, while Norway, France, Belgium, Italy, and Ireland have higher productivity than the UK and also the US. Looking at labor resource utilization, is the total number of hours worked, then we can say the UK is the highest if we look hours over working population. But what is important is this one, that the employment rates divide Europe in two parts, Northern Europe and Continental Europe. Now we go behind this global picture, and we want to understand more the differences between the UK and Continental Europe. Like our previous analysis suggested that there are differences in terms of employment rates. So the first things we want to look at is the functioning of the labor market. And then there are differences in terms of labor productivity. This is still a puzzle, and the government is putting a lot of effort to understand these differences. So these are just potential explanations. Is there a lack of supply of skill, like the English people, British people they do not have the right skills or enough skills, they're not educated as much as the population in continental Europe, or there is an underutilization of skills? So we'll try to answer these two questions. Okay, the labor market. Here we consider two groups of countries, the Northern Europe and Continental Europe. What I want this was another result that was important from the previous analysis. There are large differences across countries. As you've seen from the previous, each country is in its own and has a different indicators of performance. So we look at the labor market, and then we analyze differences in labor market institution. This is a big word. What I mean is the welfare state. The welfare state, how the government is putting money and effort to give incentives into the labor market, to put incentives into the labor market. Then we look at the unemployment rate, non-participation in the labor market by gender and age, and wage inequality. I have chosen these because they are the indicators in which you can really see the difference, or it's easier to see the difference between countries of continental Europe and the UK. Okay, I don't want to spend too much time on these. What I want just to remember is this. When we speak about labor market institutions, in particular in the labor market, we speak about 4 different types. So like the unemployment benefit system, if you are unemployed, you receive a benefit from the government. And then it's employment protection legislation. Again, it's a big word, and it means like if it's easier for a firm to fire or to hire a worker. And according to these 2 indicators, the UK is more flexible. The level of unemployment benefits is lower, and also the employment protection legislation is less strict. You can see here is less strict. And then other labor market institutions are trade unions and the taxes on labor. Again, according to these indicators, the UK has lower taxes, and it's easier, or like it's more flexible in the UK to set the wages. So what I want just you to remember for this is what was written at the beginning of this, that the European market, the European Union does not have a single market. So here, if you leave Utah and you go to work in Colorado, probably you have the same set of rules, the same regulation for the labor market. In the European Union, it's not like that. If you are in France, there is a set of rules. If you are in Italy, there is another set of rules. If you go to the UK, there are another set of rules. And countries are very close. Europe is not a big, the United States is much larger nation than Europe. But they're highly, countries in European Union are highly different. Okay, so excuse me, I went the other way. Okay, because of these differences, we find differences in unemployment rate. These are just averages. What I want you just to remember is this. In the 80s, the unemployment rate was relatively high in the UK. Look at now. It's lower. It's almost half than in countries of continental Europe. Of this change, at least half of this change, of this evolution, can be explained by different labor market institutions. That's why I wanted to introduce them to you. But now we can look at the non-participation or in the labor market. These are what is called inactivity rates. It means like people who are not who are not working, and people who are not unemployed. People that stay at home or just they don't participate in the labor market. And I divide by gender and by age. We start from the females. I guess it's better to start from there. The older female and the younger female. The UK is here, is in red. If we make the comparison between the UK and countries of continental Europe, there is a higher participation of females in the labor market. It's striking the difference between Italy and Spain and the UK. If you look at the older male, is again that the results is that in the UK there is a larger participation of older men in the labor market relative to continental Europe. But what I want you to remember is this. This is our prime age men, like 25, 54, is the real source of income in an economy. And the UK actually has a slightly higher inactivity rate than country of continental Europe. I don't want now to go into try to explain why it's not, but the reason behind this. But what's important that the UK labor market is functioning quite well, but there are still problems, and this, I don't want to spend time on these. Simply is that because of the differences, in labor market institution and the fact that the wages are set more freely in the UK, there's more wage inequality in the UK than in countries of continental Europe. So this is just a summary. I have continental Europe on one side and United Kingdom on the other side. So it's like, regarding the unemployment rate, is much higher in continental Europe than in the UK. Female participation is lower in continental Europe than in the UK. And is also the participation of older men is lower in continental Europe than in the UK. But there are problems in the UK as well, with slightly higher inactivity rate and higher wage inequality. Okay, this was the first part of the going behind the global picture. Now we try to go behind this, the differences in terms of labor productivity. And this part is slightly more difficult, I guess it is, because it's still unexplained. Okay, the first two, the potential explanation are, I ask myself, is there a lack of skill supply? Are British workers less skilled than workers in continental Europe? So the first things I wanted to do is to look at the educational attainment of the population. And it's here. So many tables, I hope not to lose you here. So the educational attainments. This is just the percentage of the 25-64 population with a certain educational attainment. And we have lower secondary, upper secondary, vocational. This vocation is like in Europe, you have some countries like Germany, in which you can go to university, to tertiary education, and take a vocational degree to learn a job more than an academic degree. in some countries, this is not. Like in Italy, we don't have this, separation, so the number is missing there. But just compare, of course, there are some differences. But look at Germany and UK. The performance, like the numbers for the UK are very similar to the number for Germany. So, and actually the percentage of people in tertiary education is actually higher than in countries in continental Europe. So I don't think, well, from these results, it doesn't seem that the UK is a problem of lack of skill supply. But then what I thought to do, this is the second point. Well, maybe the UK is a higher employment rate, but it employs people with less education, so as a larger proportion of people with low skill, low education in employment. So I wanted to see the employment rates among persons with less than upper secondary education. Again, the picture here was very similar, something about 51, 58%. The countries were very similar to each other, according to this indicator. But there is a study from the OECD Literacy Survey. It presents the data from 94 to 98, and it shows that something like 22% of the UK population is at a lowest level of literacy. They try to measure the prose literacy, document literacy, or quantitative literacy. And they found something like 22% of the population was at the lowest level of this, according to this indicator. While in countries like Germany, Sweden, and Netherlands, was only 10% of the population had these difficulties. Unfortunately, there were not results for Italy, France, or Spain. But at least according to countries of Northern Europe, it seems there is a larger proportion of UK population, adult population, so 25, 64, who have some problems. Then this is the last potential explanation. But then, okay, if there is no problem with the lack of skill supply, is there a problem with the utilization of these skills, of the people with skills? Then I know of two, well, they are different, but I know in particular of two studies. One has been run by McKinsey and the London School of Economics. They done a survey, and they found that in the UK manufacturing firm, the managerial, on average, we can say the managerial practices were lower in the UK than in countries than France, Germany, and the US. So the lower score. So managers were less able than managers in France, Germany, and the UK. And then also shows that looking at the adoption, they found that if there is just adoption of new ICT, then you have an increase in productivity. But when there is ICT plus managerial practices, then the evolution is like the productivity rises much, much more. But what I want you to, again, to consider is that the results of this study applies only to manufacturing. And we know that only 13% of the workforce in the UK is employed in manufacturing. And more than 80% of the workforce is employed in services. And we know that the UK is an important financial center. It's the the largest financial center in Europe, or among, Switzerland, Luxembourg, and London. So a study that probably shows or try to understand that the managerial practices in financial services will be probably more important than concentrating on manufacturing. And then there's another study that has tried to look at, okay, we have these high unemployment rates, and there's been an increase in jobs. There's low unemployment, so there is an increase in jobs in the UK. So where these jobs are created, in which sectors? And we say, well, the majority in services. But which kind of jobs, in occupation of which level? And they found that there was in the last 25 years, there were large increases in number of high-skilled, high-productive jobs, and a large increase in the number of low-skilled, low and badly paid jobs. And the one in the middle, they were just disappearing. Just imagine all people, like in London, there are a lot of people coming and working in bars, cafe, McDonald's, restaurants, Pizza Hut, and the young people, particularly they go there. And then you have also cleaners. These are all the low skill, low occupation, occupational level jobs. And this job cannot be replaced by a machine. So the introduction of technology has not helped to reduce the number of people employed in these jobs. So there are good reasons to think that there is perhaps inadequate supplies of skills, according to this service with the literary survey by the OECD. And probably there's a most probably poor utilization of skills in certain sectors. The literature, like economists and social scientists, sometimes they speak about the UK model as a model of skill polarization because of this, this creation of jobs in different, like low skill or high skilled or low level occupation and high level occupation. So we have skilled workers in financial services, in aerospace, telecommunication, media, and we have low-skilled workers in manufacturing, domestic services, trade, catering industries. And then also the skill polarization can explain the increase in wage inequality as well. Okay, this is just the conclusion. I ask myself, what have we learned from this? So we have first given a global picture, and we have found that there are large differences in terms of income level and growth rates among European countries. And then we have tried to look at the sources of these income differences. And in particular, we are concentrated on what we are called labor resource utilization, that is the total numbers of hours worked by an employee, and the effect on labor productivity. So the amount of production, we can say, produced in an hour, created in an hour. Then the second part was the fact that we went behind the global picture, and we look at the labor market, because there were so many one characteristic was these differences in employment rates between northern countries and countries of continental Europe. And we have seen that the UK has, relative to continental Europe, lower unemployment rate, higher labor market participation of females and older men, flexible labor market institution, but there are still problems such as higher inactivity rates and among prime age men, so the real source of the economy, and a higher wage inequality. And the last part was about the labor productivity. We know that we've seen the UK as a lower labor productivity than countries like France, Germany, Italy. And we have given some perhaps potential explanation, like the lack of skill supply in certain sectors, and in particular underutilization of skills and skill polarization. Thank you.